GM Bonjour. I am Sarang from Sushi. I kind of deal with anything smart contracts. And today we'll be looking at building on BentoBox, which would probably change the way you kind of develop on Solidity or smart contracts, which is kind of like an infrastructure layer. I would try to squeeze in a bit of some coding so that you guys can see something live as a demo or something. But there will be like a challenge for you guys. And if you guys do it, find me and I can give you some swags. So let's see what's the agenda for it. So first of all, like what's broken in the system, right? Like why BentoBox, and then like what is BentoBox. Then we'll look at some of the features of BentoBox, and then like how can you get started building on top of it. And I'll give you some boilerplate code and some templates so that you can just fork and you can just kind of building. Like I'm from Sushi, so I love forking. So let's see, like one of this slide shows like Sablier Finance, which has been an excellent tool for the community to pay out salaries, had more than 1 billion plus TVL. Probably not now in the beer market, but when I took the screenshot, it was like 1 billion plus. And then we have everybody's favorite Gnosis Safe, right? So it's like go-to tool for treasury management, and it has a lot of funds. Can you see one problem with these tools? All the funds are idly sitting doing nothing, right? So they are just kept there on the smart contract, stored, doing nothing. BentoBox solves this. We'll get to the point like how it's going to solve this, but let's first identify the problem. So the first problem is that the apps we have, like Sablier and Gnosis Safe, are not capital efficient enough. Who hates this screen? I just hate this, right? Every other new Dapp I open, right, it's going to ask me for all these stupid approvals, and it's going to cost me a lot of money, right? But these stupid approvals saves us a lot of money from getting wrecked, right? Because if somehow we don't have this, Dapps can just take away your money, right? So it's an important step, but it's a very big UX hurdle that we have. There are some intermediate solutions for this, such as permit functions, right? That allows you to sign and then you can like batch it together and Dapps can use it. But the problem with that is that it's only available for a handful of tokens such as USDC, DAI, and a couple of others, right? The other problem that you have while developing dApps is having this weird token crazy gas calculation. So for instance, USDC has some checks, USDT has more checks, right? So there is no way for you to identify what would be the exact gas cost for your function operation for all the tokens. And not to mention the esoteric ERC777 where you have like, multiple hooks on deposits, withdrawals and stuff like that. So it's very difficult for you to actually measure your gas cost, right? And it's variable, in fact. BentoBox solves all of these problems. It solves the problem of capital inefficiency in the dApps. It solves the problem of variable and high gas cost. It solves the problem of approval hell. So what if I tell you, after this presentation, you'll be able to write much more capital efficient, much more gas efficient, and like much more UX friendly dApps without actually changing your coding style at all, right? So you just have to follow just few steps and that's it. So what is BentoBox after all? BentoBox is basically like a token vault. So it's basically into an infrastructure smart contract layer where it's a set of contracts that acts as a vault. You as a user or a developer develops app on top of these BentoBox, which then deposits the capital on BentoBox, which are used in something called as strategies, which gives you an extra yield, hence the capital efficiency. All the value logged inside BentoBox is stayed within the BentoBox contract and goes to some other protocols for the strategies. Everything inside BentoBox is an accounting unit, just like your bank, right? So for instance, when you go into your bank and you deposit your precious money, right? Bank use it in some strategies, but you can still see your balance on your phone app or something like that, right? But actually that balance might not exist with the bank right now, right? So BentoBox works with the same kind of features where you make apps and you deposit money on BentoBox. BentoBox uses that money and puts in different strategies, and BentoBox apps deals with something called as shares. We're gonna look at it one by one, but this is how do you develop apps without BentoBox. So this is your Dapp. This is Boring Bob. He doesn't know how to develop dApps and stuff like that. So he just created a Dapp without BentoBox. He put in his money, this money is stored inside the smart contract itself. It's a normal way. And after some time, he gets some token back with some yield. So far, so good. Now, let's go to Degen Bob, which uses BentoBox to develop his apps. So as I told, BentoBox is like a smart contract infrastructure layer, and you can build more dApps on top of it. Now, Degen Bob deposits some tokens on BentoBox. These tokens can be used by these dApps, right? So now, in the same time, these tokens are also supplied to a strategy, such as Aave. After this strategy, you get some yield, and it comes back and stores back into the BentoBox, making BentoBox and you much richer. All this while, you still have a virtual balance inside BentoBox that your dApps can query and see that this user owes this much to us. And now Degen Bob get more yield for the same application that he built from the BentoBox. Some of the features of BentoBox are strategies. So you can deposit tokens and BentoBox automatically puts it into strategies such as Aave, Compound, Yearn, and Sushi. Gas optimization. Now, because all these operations are getting done inside the BentoBox contract, so it's just a balance change inside BentoBox, right? It does not actually touch any token contracts, right? So you deposit token on BentoBox, all the tokens are on BentoBox. Now, let's say if you want to transfer A to B some tokens inside BentoBox, it's just a balance change inside BentoBox. It's not going to touch the token contracts and do a transfer. Flash loans. So BentoBox supports flash loan. BentoBox has huge amount of assets that you can use to flash loan, and the yield from the flash loan gets divided to the people who are inside BentoBox. It has batching support. So you can batch multiple operations of BentoBox together to have much more UX friendly experience. So for me, I look at BentoBox as an app store, a savings account, and a smart contract infrastructure layer all combined into one. So it's like your AWS, your bank, and your Google Play Store, because we have a lot of different apps built upon BentoBox. Some of the apps are from Sushi, some of the apps are not from Sushi, but they all share all the same advantages that you can see here. Some key points to remember before we move on further is user only approves BentoBox via an approval transaction. They do not need to approve your dApp. So everything happens through BentoBox. So it acts like a funnel to your dApp, right? So everything goes inside the BentoBox. Every approval happens to the BentoBox, and your dApp leverages BentoBox to basically deal with everything. That is why you could see that there is a common point, and hence people don't have to approve all the tokens again when they have to use your dApp. All funds are stored in the BentoBox contract, and Bento apps, what we call it, works with basically virtual balances and share. Whenever there are transfers between, say, user to user inside BentoBox, or dApps to dApps, or Dapp to user, they all happen within the BentoBox contract. There is no external call that happens. The only place BentoBox touch external calls are deposits and withdrawals. So if somebody wants to deposit from outside BentoBox, from their wallet, they do an external call. When you have to withdraw from the BentoBox to your wallet, you do an external call, and that's it. But obviously, these two, again, are expensive operations. But if you do everything inside BentoBox, it's so much cheaper. So from our research, we found out this infographic that says users like the apps which are built upon BentoBox because they earn extra yield rather than the apps which are not. So it's a choice which statistics you want to go forward with. Yep. Some of the apps built upon BentoBox are Isolated Lending and Borrowing Market Kashi, Abracadabra Finance. You might have also heard about Meme and Sifu. It's that. Sushi Limit Orders, Trident, and Furo Vesting and Streaming. So we just saw an example of Sablier, right? Where Sablier has a lot of capital underutilized. We built Furo, which basically allows you to use that capital while you're paying your salaries. So let's say if your employer starts a salary for you, now you are earning yield on that logged amount. So when you withdraw your salary, you're getting more out of it, right? So make sure you tell your employees to pay you via Furo. Trident is basically our next generation AMM. So it's built upon BentoBox. So for the example in Uniswap, right? When you LP, your capital is just stored in the contracts doing nothing, right? We could see that a lot of capital from these Uniswap pairs are not even utilized, right? With Trident, you're actually putting it inside BentoBox, so all this capital is also being utilized in another place. So with the trading APR, you also get the strategy APR, making yourself earning more than normal Uniswap V2 pairs. Then you have limit orders. So when you create these limit orders with BentoBox, you're basically earning yield while your limit order is executed. Everybody knows about Abracadabra and MIM Finance, right? They're like this CDP kind of a clone where you could deposit the assets and mint out MIM, which you can use it for any other purpose you want. Then you have isolated borrowing and lending market Kashi, which allows you to lend and borrow assets in an isolated fashion. It probably, in my knowledge, was the first isolated borrowing and lending concept that was introduced way before Aave V3 and everything was launched. And next could be your Dapp as well. So if you build a Dapp, we're kind of having like this Bento apps page, like an app store, where your Dapp could be featured and people could access them. Let's go to a bit of tricky concept of amounts and shares, which kind of tend to confuse a lot of our integrators as well. So amounts are the actual amount that the user owns, and shares are the virtual balance inside BentoBox. So same like in your bank, right? You deposit like say 100 USD, you might show the bank might show you the balance that you have 100 USD, but underlying it actually invested somewhere else, right? And then it accrues yield on top of it, which you don't see until unless they pay you out, right? So it's the same way. So share is something that is stored for internal and virtual computation, whereas amounts are the actual money that you hold. So whenever a user deposits any amount, it gets converted to shares, and then it's stored in a BentoBox in a mapping. Whenever a user withdraws, these shares are converted back to the amounts so that you get the yield that is accrued, and you get like more amount than you have actually deposited. So ideally, when you're building dApps, you should just use shares, because that way your users can get the advantage of having an extra yield. So there's a simple formula to convert the amounts to share. So you take the supplied amount, multiply it by total share, and then divide it by total amount. Then you take for the share to amount conversion, you take these supplied shares, multiply it by total amount, and deposit in total shares. Sounds mathematical? Let's go with an example. So let's say we have Alice depositing 1000 USDC into BentoBox. So let's say this is the first deposit. So there has been no strategy, no APR, nothing. And right now the share of Alice would be 100 because everything is 0, right? So it's just 1000. The balance of BentoBox would be also 1000 because there's nothing else. And the amount of Alice would be also 1000 because it has not accrued anything or any stuff. Now from a strategy, if a BentoBox gains like say 200 USDC, the share always remains constant because that's a virtual balance that would always remain constant whenever you deposit. The balance of BentoBox has increased to 1200, right? Because it has got $200 from one of our strategies like Aave, Yearn, Sushi, whatever, right? And the amount of A is now different because according to the formula, you take the supplied share, which was 1000, multiply it with the total amount, which are 1200, divided by total shares. That would give you 1200 USDC. So Alice just earned 1200 USDC just by depositing into BentoBox. Now let's say Bob also joins the party, right? So he deposits another 1000 USDC. So the share of Alice is always going to be constant. So it's 1000. Share of B, however, is not going to be 1000 because now there's been an yield accrue, right? So you need to use the formula to calculate how much shares would Bob receive. In this case, it is receiving something called as like 833 or something. The total balance of BentoBox is like 2200 USDC. So amount of B is 833 into the total amount of balance that BentoBox has divided by the total number of shares that yields you 1000. Sounds correct? Let's say now from another strategy, BentoBox gains more 200 USDC. Share of A still remains 1000. Share of B would be 833 because shares never change. Shares are constant. The BentoBox balance, however, is 2400 USDC now, right? So now when you put it into the amount formula, you get like 1309 for Alice and 1091 for B. So you could see there's been a split between the yield, right? Because now there was one more participant into the BentoBox ecosystem. And when we add up all this, it comes to the exact value of 24 USDC. It means that the maths check out. Obviously, if the maths did not check out, BentoBox would have been kind of seafood for like $3 billion. So yeah, you can trust me on the math. So now let's look into how do you integrate BentoBox. But before like going on further, do you guys have any question about what BentoBox is, or something? For now I would say you would understand it's not a dish, right? So yeah. So if not, let's go ahead. So the first step to use BentoBox is something called as register protocol inside the BentoBox contracts. Once you call that, what it means, like we are just emitting an event which is registering that, hey, I want to use BentoBox and register me, right? It's just like that. The other thing is, now you need to find a way in which the other people can approve your Dapp to access the BentoBox funds that they have. Remember, like everybody's approving BentoBox, right? Nobody's approving your app. So how would your app get the funds from the BentoBox? They have to use something called a set master contract approval function. They pass in the user, they pass in the master contract, they pass in the address of the contract that needs the access of the user's funds. They pass in the approve. So if it's true, it means that the user is giving the approval. If it's false, it means that user is revoking the approval. Then VRS are the signature parameters. So what you can do is you can use a signature from the user, batch it with some other smart contract operation that you have, and do approval and that operation just in one transaction. So unlike approval hell, they're like not 2 or 3 different transactions that a user has to do. Once a user approves this, you get access to all the tokens that the user has approved to the BentoBox. So it's not like you just get access to like say USDC or USDT, but if the user has approved like 100 tokens to the BentoBox, you get access to all of them using one single approval. Right? So it becomes much more easy for Dapps and the UX experience because users don't have to see that approval screen anymore. The other function that you need is the deposit function, right? Because you need to deposit functions from your, like the user's wallet into the BentoBox. So this is where you use deposit function, where the funds are transferred from the user's wallet to the BentoBox if the user doesn't have it, or if the user chooses to deposit it from your Dapp. So token would be the token which he wants to deposit. From would be with like the user's address. To would be the address of where he wants to deposit it to. Amount would be the amount he wants, and then there is an optional parameter share. So you can use either amounts or share. The reason for that is because BentoBox will do the conversion for you. So you don't have to do the complicated maths that we did few slides back. BentoBox would automatically do the conversion for you. So you can either pass shares, amounts, and BentoBox is gonna take care of that. Then you have the transfer function. The transfer function is used to basically transfer funds inside the BentoBox. This is not an ERC20 standard, like transfer function. So when you pass token, from, to, and share, it's going to do that internally. So it's an internal balance change inside BentoBox, like how you transfer internally to your bank account, right? Let's say if we both have bank account in like Citibank, right? It's easier for Citibank to do that. It's cheaper for the Citibank to do that. So BentoBox is the same concept. If you do it inside BentoBox, it's way cheaper. So this transfer deals with the internal balance change inside the BentoBox. Then you have the withdraw. So obviously the user needs to withdraw from the BentoBox, right? And get his sweet yield. This is what he calls. So when you put like token, from, to, amount, and share, the same concept as of deposit, then you're able to basically like withdraw tokens from the BentoBox. So far, so good. Do you guys want to see some code on how do you do this? So I have created like a BentoBox template, and it's called a BJ BentoBox. So it's like Bonjour BentoBox. It was GM BentoBox before, but because we are in France, so why not? So not sure if you guys can see my screen, or should I kind of zoom in more? Yes. Okay, awesome. So this is like a standard hard hat template. Probably if you guys can create like a Foundry or a Brownie template as well, it will be awesome. But let's look at the contract. So this is like a BJ BentoBox. So it's like hello world for BentoBox, right? It's a very simple contract where we basically import the BentoBox interface. So let's go look at the interface as well.
Sorry, can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me know if this is the right zoom in.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. So the interface just has the function interfaces for like say to share to convert it to share, to amount to convert it to amounts if you wanna convert inside your app you can easily do it. Deposit, as we saw, allows the users funds from the wallet to be deposited onto BentoBox. Withdraw allows you to withdraw the funds from the BentoBox to the user's wallet. Transfer is used for internal BentoBox balance manipulation. And then you have the set master contract approval for your Dapp to get access to the user's BentoBox funds and stuff like that. And then let's go to BJ BentoBox. So BJ BentoBox is like a very straightforward concept where we have like deposits. So it's based upon the concept of bank notes and bank receipts. That, I mean, like we had that in India where, you know, you basically do a deposit and the banker gives you like a note, and that was your non-fungible NFT back then. So anybody having that note, or, you know, that basically that NFT could basically go back to the bank and claim back his deposit. I don't know why do people used to do that, but it was just a concept. So in this one, right, it has a struct user, token, and deposited shares. Because now when we create a Bento app, we have to be careful that we are dealing everything back in shares. Obviously, you can do it with amounts as well, but then you kind of lose one of the most important aspect of BentoBox, which is an extra yield that you get, right? So we basically define the contract address of the BentoBox on that particular chain. We define who's the owner of this contract. Total deposits is the number of deposits that happen into this contract. This basically takes care of the mapping between the depositor and how much amounts he owns. Then we basically kind of, you know, set the owner, set the address of BentoBox in the constructor, and we do the first step of BentoBox, which is register protocol. So obviously, because now you're building this, you want it to happen in the first step, and that is why it's in the constructor. This is the set BentoBox approval function. So you can pass in the user, the status of, you know, like if he wants to be true, false, if he wants to revoke or invoke the approval. VRS are the signature parameters. And then you do a call to the BentoBox.set master contract approval, which was stage 2, right? Where you now take the access, ask the users that, hey, you want to use my Dapp? Give me access to your BentoBox. And obviously, the user have to do their own due diligence that the app is not a rug. Otherwise, the app could take away all the funds, right? The same way with the approval, that you should not approve any day app or any smart contract which is, you know, vulnerable or which is like a rug pull, right? So assuming the user did the due diligence and signed it, we would relay that signature to the BentoBox contract, and that would give us the access of users' funds. Now, there's a function called as deposit to BJ BentoBox, which needs a token, amount, and from BentoBox. Now, what does from BentoBox means? In this context, it means like from where the funds are coming into this contract. Is it from a wallet or is it internally from BentoBox? So let's say if a user has funds internally in its BentoBox, right, then they can just use from BentoBox as true because it's going to transfer it internally, which is much more cheaper. Whereas if they don't have any funds inside BentoBox, they can use it false, and BentoBox will pull their funds from the token contract, deposit it into BentoBox, and then give us the access in our Dapp. So it kind of handles both the cases. So it's not like you first have to always do a deposit transaction for the user. It kind of does everything in just one. So we first check. So if from BentoBox is true, we pass in the amounts. So now we have to convert this amounts to shares. So we use BentoBox.toShare to convert this amount to share. Because transfer only works with share because it's internal function, right? It's an internal balance transfer. So it needs share. So you take this amount and convert it to shares. You pass in the token. Message.sender is the the person from where you want to take this token, or from who's the user of this, like this function. Then address this should be your Dapp address, because where do you want it? You want it inside your Dapp, right? But it's actually stored inside the BentoBox itself, but it corresponds to your DApp address, right? Now, in the else, you have, so if the user wants to deposit it from the wallet, they're going to call deposit, because now it's going to fetch from the token contract all the tokens that is required, store it inside BentoBox, and then transfer it to your particular Dapp. So it's the same thing. And in this case, because we already know what the amount is, we're just passing amount and we are passing 0. So if you only have to pass either amount or shares. So if you pass in just amounts, it's going to convert inside the contract for BentoBox and you're good. If you pass in share, it's just going to use that. Then in the mapping, we basically, kind of use total deposits. We kind of store these deposits. So user would be message sender. token would be the token that was supplied, and the deposited shares. So all this function basically returns us deposited shares, as we could see, and we're going to increment the total deposit. In the withdraw function, we basically have, we check like, you get a deposit ID. So call it like an FT ID or note ID or whatever, right? You get this ID, you can see like, who's the owner. So obviously you can't withdraw from my deposit ID, right? I have to be owner of it, right? So whosoever is the owner of that deposit ID should be the only one allowed. So that's the check here. Then we basically want to check that how many shares do they want to withdraw. So they pass in the amounts and we convert that to 2 share. So previously while depositing, we were converting it from the amounts to share. Now we're converting from amounts to share to get to know that how much shares that the user wants to withdraw. So we check that if the shares withdrawn, do they actually own that much shares or not, right? So that's the check here. And they can then, we are then subtracting the amount of shares that the user wants to withdraw. And then there's one more parameter called as toBentoBox. Now this is a parameter to basically define where does the user wants to receive it. Does the user wants to receive it back in its BentoBox itself, or does it want to receive it in its wallet? Receiving it in BentoBox is a much more cheaper transaction because it's again like an internal balance change inside BentoBox, whereas receiving it inside a wallet is a costlier transaction because now it's gonna do an external call via BentoBox to withdraw the funds and call the token contract, deliver it to your wallet address. But obviously it's always a good choice for for the users to have like both the options if they want it on wallet or BentoBox, so it's much more composable that way. There's one more thing called as Bento Fund, which is like a crowdfunding app that I made using BentoBox. Let's finish the presentation. Let's see if we have time, and if we have time, we can crunch in some coding sessions as well. Okay. So let's say goodbye to the cat. But so far, do you guys have any issues understanding how the structure or the flow of how the Dapps is written inside BentoBox? Because it doesn't change the functionality of your Dapp. It just changes how the users enter and exit your Dapp with the tokens, right? So it just changes your deposit, withdraw, and transfer function. Rest, all the logic that your Dapp has is always going to remain constant. So if you have a Dapp, you can just start converting that to like say BentoBox and see how easy it is, right? You can also abstract this into more generalized functions, create like a small library and reuse it that we have, and we're going to see in the Bento Fund example if we get time. So obviously we have been talking about all the good things about BentoBox, right? That sounds too good to be true. And if I'm just talking about all good things in crypto, it's definitely a Ponzi. So let's talk about some risk that we have. First of all, the risk is like if the underlying funds are used in a strategy, obviously there can be a hack on the strategy itself, right? Let's say if we put it inside, let's say Uniswap, and Uniswap gets hacked, right? I wish so, but no, I'm just kidding. But if they get hacked, right, the funds of the users inside BentoBox will be at loss, right? So now the shares will be worth less than what they were actually were, right? So this is one risk. The other risk is your general DeFi and smart contract risk, right? That you always have. That any contract you develop can be vulnerable. Maybe in future there are like upgrades that would make it vulnerable. So these are the two main risks that you have with BentoBox. And rest, it's been like completely audited, well battle tested and used. Now let's look at one interesting of strategies. So we talked about like, hey, you can lose your funds via strategies. So who manages these strategies? Is it like Sifu who manages it? Who's the one who basically governs these strategies? So only Sushi has the control to basically activate a strategy on any token inside BentoBox. So all these tokens have different strategies. They can have same strategies. They can have different strategies. It can be all the type of mix and match combinations that you want. But it's only Sushi who has the power, the Sushi DAO, who has the power to basically activate the strategy for any new token inside BentoBox. There's additionally a 14-day time lock before the strategy gets activated. The reason for that is because BentoBox holds humongous amounts of funds, and we have to be very, very careful to kind of activate any strategy. So it gives, sorry? Okay, yeah. So it gives basically a method to evaluate if the strategy activated is kind of buggy or it's safe, and that way you have like 14 days. If you feel that you're not comfortable with the strategy, you can take your money out of BentoBox and be happy with the yield that you have got. So this is also an option which is very important to us, and that is why we took kind of like a very high 14-day time lock, so that users have enough time to exit the system. Then you can Sushi only adds like strategy capital to like safe protocols. Like safe is in DeFi is like, I don't know, it's like a bit shady, right? Like safe, but nothing is safe after all, right? So what do we mean by safe here is we have added strategies to Compound, Aave, and Sushi, which already has much more significantly higher TVL than BentoBox right now. They have been there in the industry for much more longer time than BentoBox, have had multiple of audits, and have been battle tested for so long, right? So we all love Aave merch, right? When we just go and take their merch. So in the same way, we basically trust Aave to be a bit of on the safer side. Obviously, we're not gonna invest our money in some scams or some stuff like that, even though they tell us that this 3,000% APR, whatnot. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna only do strategies which are basically kind of industry approved safe protocols, or protocols which have humongous amount of TVL audits and basically like industry trust. Then Sushi also. So now you might be thinking, what if Sushi just takes away 100% of my capital as well in the strategies? Becomes difficult for you to deal with that, right? Like the Dapps, it becomes much harder because when the Dapps have to withdraw, they have to always withdraw from the strategies, right? Which is again a costly operation. So just like in banks, right, they have like a loan to value kind of ratio where they keep some amount always in the reserve. So Sushi can at max put 95% of a capital, like let's say if you have like 100 USDC in BentoBox, you can at max put 95 in a strategy and 5 would be always reserve. By reserve, I do not mean that after this somebody withdraws this 5, you cannot withdraw. You can 100% withdraw that capital, but you need to call a function called as harvest, which basically rebalances the strategy and bring back more money out of the strategy and gives it back to you. That also comes to the point that we only put in strategies which do not have a lockup. Because if you put funds in a strategy inside, like BentoBox, which have like a lockup, let's say, for instance, maybe like some fixed vault strategy, right? That's giving us 20% APR, right? But it's locking our capital for like 10 days. We can't do it because the user might need their capital back, right? Because a lot of apps built upon that are relying that BentoBox own this capital, right? So in that case, users won't be able to withdraw because the capital is locked. So we don't put it into any strategies which we can't withdraw from. So the way BentoBox strategies are created, that you can get in anytime, get out anytime. No questions asked, no time lock, nothing. So that is what, it allows us to scale much faster as well. And currently there have been strategies for Compound, Aave, and Sushi. If you guys have some protocols, or if you guys want to create strategies for Sushi inside BentoBox, there's an integrator fee. So BentoBox has like 3 billion, I think like maybe a bit down right now, but it has like around $2+ billion in TVL, right? And we have strategies only for a handful of assets, right? There are more assets which can be used inside a strategy, which is also safe enough. And you guys can find that out. And on every penny that BentoBox and its users make, you get a cut out of it. So let's say we have like, say, around like, I think it was 100 million in FTX token or something. So if you have a strategy for that, you can go there and like say if the strategy yields like 20% and you get like 10%, you get like easily $1 to $2 million per year for yourself by creating strategy for BentoBox. So obviously it's not like, quick get rich scheme. So once you create a strategy, we audit it, we make sure everything is right, we go through, then you have to kind of, help us manage it as well. Like, let's say if you want to invest more or, kind of reduce the exposure. So we're going to involve in all such activities, but obviously the reward is also quite high, right? So some of the free ideas for you guys to kind of, build on top of BentoBox that we would love to see is like indices protocol, right? Prediction market, derivative platforms, crowdfunding platform, which is basically like a Bento fund. So it's like, kind of a hackathon based contract. So, it's not some app that Sushi is going to build it, but you can easily do that, build on top of BentoBox, get yield, and, this can be your next project. Then again, an interesting project would be a multi-sig treasury and DAO management system like Gnosis Safe, but that is much more capital efficient. So the funds which are idle of these DAOs will be easily used on different strategies, right? So we already had made a Savior coin. We're calling it Furo. It's like a version 2 of Savior, you could say. And now we had one more app, Gnosis Safe, and you can use this. So Furo currently has like around like $3-4 million in TVL. We just launched like probably last month or something, but we have commitments of more than like $50 million in that. And this is just why using BentoBox and Sushi. So yep, I'm not sure how much time we have. I think we have like some 10-20 minutes or something. Okay, so if you guys have some questions, we can go with that, or we can go to the Bento Fund app and we can see how it's built. And you can also, in the, okay, let's go to Sushi.
We have 20 minutes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that sounds.
I think he wants.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about the cross-chain swaps as well.
Sorry, I had one question regarding the other here.
Yeah, sure.
Hello. Regarding the deposit function that you were saying about, can you go back to the code there
Yep.
in this BJ
Okay, in this one
BentoBox?
or in the slides?
No, this one suffices. So if I understand correctly, when you create a vault with BentoBox, all the funds, if you use deposit to BentoBox, are basically the central contract here,
Yep.
where also the funds that say I deposit USDC, they can also be allocated into strategies, right?
Yeah.
So the risk is that Sushi or the BentoBox in overall can be hacked, and then my funds will also be compromised.
Exactly.
Is there also the option that I use my own vault and keep the funds local? I missed that.
For sure. You can withdraw the funds. So in this basically withdraw, right? Where is it? Yeah. In the withdraw, right? You can choose to withdraw it to your own smart contract and keep the funds in your own smart contract. But in that case, you won't get the yield and some advantages. But that's fine. That's your choice. So
Understood.
we kind of mix match both the combos. So sometimes you keep some funds in our app. But most of the time, the true Bento apps, like say Furo or Trident, they don't do this. But like say Limit Order does this because it has to kind of execute it off the BentoBox architecture into an AMM, right? So it's kind of takes it out into a different contract and then swaps it. So that's like all your choice on how you want to mix and match. It's definitely possible.
Thank you. And there is a second question that you mentioned in the very beginning regarding, let's say, on Uniswap V2, I entered a position there, I have LP tokens, and I can also get an extra yield on top of these LP tokens. Can you elaborate on that? I maybe
sure.
missed the part.
So that's actually Trident. So basically, if you know Trident is our next generation AMM, it's basically allows you to create multiple types of AMM together, and it uses a times routing engine, which would basically route among each other. So far we have stable pool, which is like a solidly clone. We have the Sushi legacy, which is like the Uniswap V2 clone. We soon will be having a concentrated Uniswap V3. I would not say clone or whatever, but you get the point, right? Like it will be a re-implementation of that. But now, let's take the example of normal Uniswap V2, right? You have ETH, or let's say like ETH or DAI. You put into Uniswap, you get an LP position. Those funds are stored in the contract. Like your entire liquidity is like most of the time never used. And those funds are just lying there, right, doing nothing, right? In the case of Trident, imagine the same pair, but inside that, instead of putting the funds in the same contract, it goes inside BentoBox, right? So now ETH and USDC both have strategies which are used elsewhere, right? So you can swap it inside BentoBox and keep your funds inside BentoBox. Or if you need to withdraw, you can obviously swap it and withdraw it, right? If there's not enough capital inside BentoBox, it's going to rebalance it and then going to do a withdraw. So it's not like your funds will be kind of like stuck or you can't withdraw. You can always do that. Does that answer your question? Yes. Awesome. Okay. So let me just, so in the template I showed you, right? I've also written like few tests. I don't think so. This can be visible, right? No. Okay, awesome. Expected. So yeah, you can see this test case when you go home, and I can just share it right now as well. So it basically tells you how to kind of like build with BentoBox. Let's go to test. Okay. Okay, awesome. So I've written like few tests that you can look up, if you want to hook it to a UI on how you can do it, because with tests it's easier for you to see how the actual things are working, right? So I've kind of written few tests to do it. Now let's look at the Bento Fund app. So you guys know about Kickstarter, right? Yeah. Let me go to tests. Oh yeah, that's much better. Yeah, I anyway love to code in dark, so feels like natural. Yeah. So in Kickstarter, generally you have like a goal set, a start and an end date, and you present your idea, right? And people decide to fund it. If the goal is reached, right, you get the money, you build the idea, and everybody is happy. If the goal is not reached, the people can take the money back and invest in some other project, right? Sounds good? So this gives me the vibe of that DAO thing that we had, which got hacked with reentrancy, right? But kind of it never got again successful enough. So possibly this is a chance where you can take this code, make it better, make a front end, and relaunch that kind of experience where people can just propose idea, other people can fund them, and by the time while it's on the like this app, it's actually earning yield. So now you're earning more money by just doing it. So if in case you want to get a refund, you now get more back because your money was actually being utilized into strategy. And if it's the goal is met and you want to pay that person receives more money because it was in strategy. So it's like win-win for everyone. So let's say so the way I created this Dapp was, it was basically like a challenge program. So what you guys have to do is you guys have to look at these tests and figure out what functions, what are the commands that would go inside these specific functions, right? So you need to look at the test, right? If you would run the test, it would fail. So let's go to the tests. And yep. Okay. Oops, I already have the solution. So let me kind of like undo this. Yeah, no cheating, please. Yeah, okay. Let's go to the Bento Fund app. Okay, so it's the unsolved function. So when you run the test, it should fail. I mean, if it passes, I'm scared. Oh yeah, it fails, right? So you could see all these tests fails, and then so your job is to basically so I'm kind of given like small hints, like say register with BentoBox. So the first function is to kind of do the register with BentoBox. So you need to come here, fill in, that's it. And if you do it, one test passes, stuff like that. So yeah, we got to do one more to actually get some further. But I have the solution as well. So this time, where's the solution? Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you because we don't have much time, but anyway. So in this, right, we're gonna just have the solution brand, but don't see it. Try to do it yourself. I'll get to know if you have obviously seen the solution. But let's say if I wanna kind of show you how this works. So I'm just gonna copy this, come here, quickly come back, do some cheating, paste it here, and gonna recompile, retest. Let's see. At least some tests should have been passed, if not all. Yeah. So we could see that like creating a project passed. Now let's analyze this function. So what I did was let's go step by step. Okay, so this is a create project. I basically initialize certain stuff, but from here is the actual function which starts. So it says should not allow to create project earlier than current time, right? Which means that you need to have a required check, which basically checks that the start time should not be, kind of like less than the end time or something like that, right? So if you do this, so let me just comment out the rest so that you can see how it works. So I save it and I run it. So now only one of the tests would pass of the three which we did. So you can see only one passed here, right? So you look at the other test and you say that should not allow to create project if end is smaller than start. So you need to make sure that end has to be greater than start. So you kind of create that condition and then you pass a test. Should allow to create a project, right? So you basically kind of write this logic and you test it again. Obviously, the tests are created in a way if you write anything differently, it's gonna fail. But I've tried to be like more like very explicit if I can. And people had already done this challenge before. So this challenge was simultaneously created by the person like who was doing BentoBox, like who created BentoBox. He was boring crypto. He's an amazing guy. And he was competing at the same time, and two other people bet him on this contest. They bet the people who created BentoBox. So it's definitely a doable challenge, and I would like you guys to kind of give it a try. And if you guys win, you guys get a very very special merch from Sushi. So you guys can try it now, and if you can't finish it now, you guys can and I'll ask you a bunch of questions for sure to make sure that you have done it yourself. And if you don't do it now, find me anywhere into any of these parties, and if you can find me and you can tell me the solution, you win. Or just mail it to any or find just any sushi person for that matter. Sounds good? Yep.
Do you have any question?
Oh yeah, sure.
I want to circle back to when we talked about strategies. So Sushi is working on multiple chains.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know, BentoBox, does it pool all the assets from all the first of all, does it work on all the chains that you have? And also, does it pool the assets, or are they separate?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So basically, BentoBox is deployed on all the chains Sushi has. Probably it's not on just one tool, like very weird L2s, but it's all mostly on all the chains that Sushi is on. The way it does it, it uses the strategies on the same chain. So let's say there are some Arbitrum strategies. So BentoBox will only put funds there. So it doesn't pool funds between different chains and put it into one. So it doesn't do cross-chain yield aggregation, right? So it just invested there because there are few issues with the cross-chain yield aggregation. Like there can be situations where you do not get your fund out, right? Because there's not enough liquidity or something like that. Then the other part is it happens in another transaction, right? So because you need to wait for the chain to receive those funds. So that way you can't withdraw quickly. So we don't want users to lose on that withdrawals, right? If they want to do it. So it has to be an atomic operation where they can easily withdraw anytime they want. This is this was an alpha slide. I by mistakenly shared it. But anyway, we are here for the alphas, right? So there's one more kind of different version of BentoBox which is getting built by the same creator. So now people are kind of trying their own BentoBox flavors. So this is one of a new flavor which is there, which is much more in a permissionless aspect. It has some downsides and some good things. Good things is that anybody can write a strategy and you can just go deposit. Right now you could say that Sushi is controlling it. I don't trust Sushi. Maybe there's Sifu at the back end, who knows, right? So they want to avoid that, right? And you don't want to kind of invest there. So, and you want your own strategy. Maybe Andre develops a strategy and you want to put in there, right? So this is what a good advantage that yeild-box give you. The issue with this is it kind of fragments the funds, right? So basically every new strategy is like a new token itself. So it's like strategy A USDC, strategy B USDC, strategy C USDC, it kind of fragments. So Sushi is morely sticking towards the BentoBox architecture because it gives us much more capital efficiency and the integrators is much more easier for them to develop. But obviously, because it's one of the, again, an upcoming thing. So yeah, here's the alpha for that. And yep, that is it. And we're also having a launch today for cross-chain swaps. So basically, I think it's today or tomorrow, but yeah, it's today probably. So basically you can swap between all these chains atomically. Yeah, so you can see this, you can see that, and you can select say asset, let's say I'm at Avalanche and I want to go to, let's say, what are the cheap chains again? Oh, Phantom. Yeah, it's anything. So I can say put one Phantom. Oh my God, what happened to Phantom price? Anyway, AVAX to Phantom or whatever, right? And should we do a live? I'm not sure if it's launched.
Do it.
Yeah, and live things are always kind of scary. Anyway, let's see. So this is up late. Okay, let's go to, oops. Launch. Let's go to Phantom. Okay. Let me connect my wallet. I hope it's the right wallet I'm sharing. Anyway.
So which coin are we swapping to?
So we're swapping to AVAX to Phantom. It can be anything, but I think I'll just have AVAX in this. So yeah.
One of them is on Opera chain, is that it?
That's the Phantom in it. Yeah. So we're going from the Avalanche to Phantom. How much should I swap? Let's see. No, let's go to, oh, got it. Let's change my account to this one. Yep. Let's see. 0.5 sounds enough. Yeah, I think so. So it's gonna basically, kind of tell you the route. So you can see the route. It goes through Avalanche. It gets swapped into USDC, which is then bridged through Stargate, and then the USDC is again swapped to Phantom. All happens in like one transaction, and then obviously Legacy and Trident is basically like Avalanche and Phantom do not have Trident right now, but places where you have Trident, it's gonna choose the best path between Legacy and Trident. So you need to approve BentoBox. Can you see this? The approval screen. This is how it looks like. But it's just a signature. So I can just sign it. And so this is not a transaction, this is a signature. So it's not like an approval handling thing. It's still annoying, but not as much. And then you can confirm. If it breaks because it's still not launched probably. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Oh, it didn't break so far. Okay, so we can see that it's swapping 0.5 UX. So it did that. Now it's sending the USDC to the destination chain, and then it will swap USDC for 37 Phantom. Let's say if this transaction failed, because there's a chance, right, where it flares due to slippage or something, you then would get USDC that you can swap on the other chain that you can again swap to any asset you want. Okay. So generally takes like 1 to 2 minutes depending upon how the condition is, and obviously this changes differently to different chains, because let's say if you're going to Ethereum, they're like 15 seconds. If you're going to Polygon, it says 500. I'd probably wait for 1,000 blocks or whatever. So we kind of added like more buffers for our swaps to be much safer. Oh yeah, we got it. Here it is. Oh yeah, explorers are a bit slow these days. So yeah, so we basically like swap USDC. AVAX to Phantom, from AVAX chain to Phantom chain, and this word could, probably it's actually quicker than 1 minute, because I'm doing the presentation, time runs faster. Let's see. Okay, this was 1 minute ago.
How much did we pay for gas for this?
Okay, let's see that. This was 36. So the total transaction took around 30 or 20 seconds. Let's see the gas. So we paid around. We paid 11. Oh no, sorry. Here's the transaction. We paid around like 36 cents, which is like cheap enough, right? So yeah, and yeah. So it depends upon the condition, right? So let's say if you're sending USDC, then we're not swapping, right? So there's no additional fee there. It just kind of I teleport. I'm lacking the word bridge. Oh yeah, bridge onto the other chain, and then on the other chain, if you just want USDC, there's no swap. So there's just the bridge fee. Then let's say if it's a swap, so you additionally incur 0.3% of the Sushi fee, or depending. Like Trident has multiple fee tiers, so probably it can be like 0.1, 0.2, depending upon which kind of pool you are in. Yep.
So our total fee would be this plus the 0.3% that we're paying to Sushi?
No, this includes everything.
No, the transaction fee doesn't include that.
So transaction fee is always considered different, right? It's
that's
not.
The blockchain fee.
Yeah, that's a blockchain fee. Yeah.
So there would be 36 cents plus the 0.3.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and the Stargate fee. So basically, the fee calculation here is a bit different, because it depends upon which DEX it is going on, which pool it is going on, which bridge it is going on. So if you want to exact for this, I can tell you, because there were like 2 transfers. So both of them do not have Trident. It was Legacy, so it's going to be 0.3 plus Target. I think it's 6 BPS if I'm not wrong. But yeah, so that much fee.
And also a transaction fee like
Yeah,
this.
the transaction fee, exactly.
Plus, this is just for Avalanche, and also on
No, you don't have to pay anything on Phantom. So you only pay the transaction fee on the source, and on the destination, you just directly receive your asset. So if this address had 0 Phantom, it did not care. It would have got Phantom. The other thing is, we have not, I think, switched it on, but you can also get, like gas refill. So if you don't have gas money on that token or that native token, you can basically add that and how much you want it, and you'll even get that. And this is going to be the start of Sushi's multi-chain expansion, where you have not just this as a swap, but when you go to Legacy Sushi and you go to let's say pool, right? where you could see like different positions of how much you have lent and how much you have borrowed, or basically we call it as onsen menu, right, where you can see a bunch of liquidity mining or yield mining opportunity. But most of the apps you have to basically kind of go and change the chain to see most of the opportunities on other chains, right? Sushi is deployed on like 16 chains. We're going to show all of these 16s together, and you can directly ape into the best one what is available. Like say if you're into USDC, right, you can directly ape into that, and it's going to do everything, and you can ape into it from any chain using the cross chain functionality that I just showed you. So you can mix like say 5 chains together, you can get all the capital, and in one click you can transfer them all to the other chain and LP into it and start farming Sushi. So yeah. Oh
Yeah. I have 2 questions. What are the tools for writing a Vault strategy? And the second is that in the process people register through our Dapp users, and like my question is, can the Dapp make a withdrawal for all its users?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it can be done too. Okay.
Yep. So the first one, you can go to Sushi, get Sushi's GitHub, and you can find. Yep. You can find a folder called as BentoBox strategies. Yep. So you could find like how the strategies are written in this, and it's pretty straightforward. You have like a base strategy, which basically kind of inherits. Which gets inherit in the strategies. So this is like an Aave strategy. So you can see that there's a base strategy which gets inherited, and you can write the underlying functions of harvest and skim and withdraw and exit. So it basically contains all these functions that you can just code, and you have a strategy for Aave right there. So it's like a 103 lines contract, and you basically invest on Aave. On the other question, yes, you can withdraw all the capital for your Dapp for your users, because they technically are inside your contract address in the BentoBox, right? It's still in the BentoBox, but it's under your Dapp address account, right? So you can always withdraw, pull it in if you want, send it to the users, Sifu it to your own, doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. Sounds good? Yep, I think it's good enough.